Well, hi, everyone. Welcome back to Reason for Hope. My name is Father Alex Wilgus. I'm a priest here in Chicago, Illinois, and I'm back with my good friend and mentor, Father Stephen Gautier. Welcome back, Father Stephen.
Thanks, Alex. Great to be back.
We are two priests who are talking about life in challenging times, specifically the coronavirus pandemic that the whole nation and increasingly the whole globe is starting to deal with. In our first episode, we talked about what the Christian response has traditionally been to times of real stress and real adversity, which we're all facing now to one degree or another. So we talked about the Christian response is the virtue of hope, which is this confident assurance and a context that helps us to do what we know that we need to do in times like this, which is keep going and keep hoping and keep having this confident assurance that we're going to work through this. And we Christians have traditionally described that as the virtue of hope. But we talked about, but Stephen, you threw a wrench into this. I feel like because you let us know that there's actually hope by itself without having a reason for hope. Is actually wrong. It's actually ill-founded. We could be hoping in something that is completely pointless or meaningless. So I wanted to pick up on our conversation today and ask you. We're looking for a reason to found our hope on. But we as Christians, are we the first people to have asked that question?
Hardly. We are standing on giant shoulders,
Okay.
especially here in the West.
Yeah. Well, take us back. I want to talk a little bit. How long have people been looking for a foundation for their hope?
Well, forever. In a sense, let's look at the Greeks, which we think of as our own tradition here in the West, played a very vital role. Is when you want to talk about anything, when we talk about progress, progress means you're heading towards a goal, you're heading somewhere. And you can't talk about progress or where am I unless you know where you're going.
Yeah.
There has to be a point of there have to be landmarks. There has to be a point of reference to know where we are.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I took a trip out west to Carlsbad Caverns. I'm from Texas, and I remember taking out, this is way back in the day of paper maps, and taking this big paper map and looking at the landmarks on the way and seeing what town we were in and how many more it would take to get there. So yeah, it makes me think about that.
Well, one of the things the Greeks found early on is under all the chaos, there clearly were signs we could see of discernible signs of order.
Okay,
that's why the fascination with mathematics.
Okay.
Somehow, under what appears to be chaos, there seem to be patterns.
You mean like in the world?
In the world, in the regular world we live in. There seem to be patterns.
Yeah.
And this would be described as wisdom, Sophia in Greek, or Chokhmah in Hebrew, the same notion, was there really are patterns. I mean, there really is something under this, and knowing those patterns, we can adjust. It's sort of like knowing certain things about the physical world can help us use the physical world. Like knowing about gravity is a big help.
Yeah.
It can help us with tools, things like this. And so they actually wanted to study this. And philosophy, technically, Sophia is wisdom. Philosophy means love of wisdom, but not love in the sense of the pursuit. Mm-hmm. It's more like knowledge. How do we find out about these patterns and work with them?
Yeah.
And so the original Greek philosophers weren't talking about morals. They were talking about what we would call the STEM disciplines.
So they're basically scientists.
They're scientists. They were talking about as best they could. They were trying to look at an explanation of things. This is how we get astronomy, Greek astronomy, mathematics, including like geometry.
Okay.
We have engineering, why they built these incredible buildings and things. So the original philosophy was looking at these patterns for physical things. The Ionic philosophers and things were primarily concerned about finding these patterns which were very physical.
Yeah, and that makes sense because when we were talking about hope, when you made the point that we have to put our hope in something that's sure and secure and isn't just not just good advice or opinion.
It's like you build a house. You look for where would be a good place to build a house.
Got it. So you're saying that the Greek philosophers looked into kind of like the deep structure of the universe and found discernible patterns,
or just the world around them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
where
like let's
mathematics, they just notice certain things. Wow, there seem to be repeated, there's patterns we can discern, and we can make use of those patterns.
I see. So they're like, okay, let's start there and let's look
Mhm.
for the foundation there. Okay, great. So what happens next?
Well, what happens is when we get beyond the physical, there's a Greek term for this called metas, beyond, metaphysics, is we're saying when it comes to people, could we apply this same principle? Are there ways we could reasonably decide what would lead to the best life for us?
Okay,
Just
I
as we
see.
know if I'm doing farming and things, there's things I can learn about farming,
Yeah, yeah.
that can take advantage of it. It's something I can do with a good life.
Uh-huh.
And so
Uh-huh.
philosophy actually starts with science and moves on to people.
I see. I see. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
wisdom
Okay.
originally was very scientific. And so they really move into this beyond the metaphysical, out into is there some pattern we can see that we can build upon those for people living better lives? Just as science can help us live better physical lives, we can build better buildings, we can build
Yeah.
better bridges that don't fall down. Is there something about knowing these patterns that can allow us to live better
Like
lives?
build better lives basically on these kind of
Mhm.
underlying metaphysical laws. I see. So okay, so how does that turn out?
Well, the trouble is normally what we keep helping, if you have theories about bridge building, one of the beautiful things that help you is empirical data. If you build a bridge and it falls down, you realize that theory, it sounded great. For some reason, maybe I don't know yet, but it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when it comes to people, it's not nearly as clear. We don't have that kind of empirical evidence. So what happened, especially when you're speculating about things, is there a God? Is these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have to ask yourself how, we can use our best human reasoning, say, here's reasons to believe yes or no. But we
Yeah.
came up with remarkably smart people like Aristotle. Think of the school of Aristotle and Plato.
Mm-hmm.
We think of the Stoics. We had some amazing, great minds who came up with wonderful systems. But the weakness at the end of the day was all of those systems were based on speculation. I mean, we tried to apply reason, but we couldn't verify our results.
I see. Like the bridge. Like we
Yeah,
kind of
we
don't
couldn't
have that.
verify that, and we just had to. We had to depend on the only evidence we had. It seemed to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like a good idea,
Yeah. 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 Okay.
like a lot of our Saturday night plans. It sounded like a good idea for the Okay.
At the time. Well, okay, so you're talking about is basically, different schools come of philosophy come to different conclusions about this.
It can be sort of funny in the ancient world because in the ancient world, philosophy was a form of entertainment.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, there were people who actually took
Really?
road shows around to fill the idle hours, and they would go to towns and they would put up, say, "Hey, well, let's talk about philosophy." And
Okay, so
what
this is
people-
ancient Netflix, basically.
Right, right. Or like self-help gurus, they would go around to towns and they would collect money and they would give these speeches.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
what would happen if you had done this for most of your life, you'd say, here's the trouble with those philosophers. Every time I listen to them, they make great sense. I really love listening to them. But, I'm always persuaded guy A is right until guy B comes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems like I'm
Okay.
always as good as the next philosopher. So how can I actually know who's right? Because
Okay,
they all
so-
sound good.
So at this point, it sounds like a lot of, really interesting, but and really well spoken, but basically just opinion. Right?
It's opinion.
Okay.
How can I get more than reasoned opinion?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And I guess I can see how that kind of makes things hard when you're talking about hope, right? Because if hope has to be on something sure, and there's a lot of smart people out there giving you their opinion on it, then how do you know what's sure?
And we have three great problems that sort of arise that we still deal with today, by the way. I mean, Christians have an answer to this, but these are hardly problems that for a lot of people who have not gone away.
Mm-hmm.
One would be basically, how can I be happy in a world where bad things happen to good people?
Yeah, that's definitely one that I've heard before. It's like that. There's something just seems cosmically wrong about that. How
And we
can
know
I-
we can't deny it. This is simply a fact
Yeah.
that bad things happen. And Aristotle dealt with this problem. He's hardly the first, but he's famous for one of his most famous quotes is, "Don't remember in the Greeks in their theater would talk about comedies or tragedies. And
Right,
comedy didn't mean ha ha. Comedy meant it had a happy ending.
Yeah, like
It
the
turns out well.
divine comedy sort of. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Although much later, but that's the
Yeah.
idea. But what happens here is he would say, in a human life, the problem is we don't really. He said we don't know. Don't call any man happy is the quote until he's dead. Don't call a man happy until he's dead. And why would he say that? Let me use an example like in the 30s. Let's think of the beginning of the Second World War. Let's imagine we have a man who owns his own company, has been very successful, he has a lovely wife, beautiful children, everything's going right, their educations are going fine. But he's Jewish in Poland.
Okay.
And one day the Nazis come through, and the SS stop and slaughter his family before his eyes and cart him off to a concentration camp. Aristotle would say, if that man knew what was going to happen, he'd have preferred never to have been born.
Sure. Even the happiness that he happened to be enjoying at one time, it just was not worth it. Like it would all.
He himself, if he had known that was the ending, would rather have not gone through it.
So his life is a tragedy. It's not a comedy.
So he's saying,
even though
we don't know.
Even though he enjoys a lot of goodness before that.
Yeah. No, he said, we don't know until we have the end of the story. So until a man's dead, we don't know. So none of us know if our lives is going to be a comedy or a tragedy.
And that definitely kind of gets in the way of our happiness now.
A lot of the most successful people live in terror that it'll end.
Right.
Their fame will end, their money will end, they'll get sick, something will happen, like here in the pandemic. No matter how rich you are, you still can get sick and die.
Yeah. It's like I feel healthy right now, but I don't know about tomorrow. That's kind of been the nature of this. So I can definitely see how that is.
Another thing is basically, how can life have meaning if basically we all end up in the same place? No matter how you run your life, whether you're a drug dealer or whether you're Mother Teresa, you all die.
Yeah.
And it's all over.
Yeah,
how can we meaningfully say that a life actually makes any difference? It will help a lot of other people. If they all die too, what difference does it make ultimately?
Yeah. No,
this is what, like in existentialism, we talk about the problem of the absurd. That life doesn't have meaning. An individual life doesn't have meaning that way.
Yeah. And even the book of Ecclesiastes it points to this problem as well, right?
Yeah, it says wise man and rich man all end up in the same place. It's better to be a live dog than a dead lion.
Yeah, okay.
And in the ancient Near East, for those who don't know this, dogs to this day, like among Muslims, are considered dirty. They think of like garbage dogs, around what do you call them? Garbage dumps.
Like junkyard dogs, sort of.
Yeah, they were not pets typically in the ancient world, and they're certainly not in the modern Middle East today.
So they were kind of like rats back then.
Yeah, he said better a live dog than a dead lion.
I see. So better, like, if you're alive and you're a really disgusting creature, better to be that than a really noble.
On purely terms, if that's all we had, you can make an argument.
Yeah.
But the third really hard is coming up with a reason to do the right thing. You see, one thing the philosophers tried to do, but they weren't very satisfied with it, was the idea that virtue is its own reward. And there's a huge element of truth. If we work hard, we tend to succeed better. Amazingly, if we're nice to people, they tend to be nice to us. A lot of people make their own personal hell. So it's certainly true, the better or the harder we work, the nicer we are, etc., we can make a better life.
Yeah.
However, it's not that simple. This is what the philosophers call heroic virtue, saying there's certain things times in life where there's no natural human explanation why we should do the right thing. Doing the wrong thing would help us.
Sure.
For example, I'm watching out there and there's a kid about to run in front of a garbage truck. And I could save him by going out myself and pushing him and getting killed.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a sweet thing to do, but how, in terms of my self-interest, if I'm dead once I'm hit by the truck, how in the world does that promote my interest? How am I any better off?
Yeah.
People may praise me, but I won't be here to see it.
So if we really take these facts seriously, that everything is going to end for us at one point, then it makes it really hard to do what we know we need to do at certain points and have this kind of heroic virtue.
And they call that heroic virtue. There's no explanation of virtue being its own. We might do the right thing. So often doing the right thing could look at some of the people who fought, again, the World War II examples, who resisted the Nazis.
Yeah. And we all see that's really laudable. Like that's really good, but maybe we don't always know why, right? We just see that it is.
Well, it certainly can't be justified in terms of self-interest. Frankly, in self-interest, sometimes doing the wrong thing will actually get you ahead.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
Stalin died in his bed and is buried in honor.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So at this point, philosophy's attempt to get at, what's our roadmap for people's running into challenges here. So what happens next?
Well, something dramatic happens at the beginning of what we now call the Common Era, starting in the first century. Something dramatic, historical event happens, a dramatic historical event
Yeah.
that will change everything in Western Europe.
Okay.
And actually Eastern, in Europe entirely, not to mention much of the Middle East. Everything will change. Something happens, it seems, to resolve these problems.
I see. Oh, that's a very good cliffhanger, Father Stephen.
Yes,
you're very good at those. Great. Well, next time we come back, we're going to keep the story. We're going to keep the story going, and we're going to actually look at what the answer is to these challenges. So until then, thanks for talking, Father Stephen, and we'll look to see you guys next time.
Look forward to it.